But I would say my advice to future leadership is, in other organizations, is to not be afraid to do a survey. Because if you want to just stay in the dark and you're worried that the results aren't going to be positive, or that you're not going to be able to satisfy employees once you know what their problems are, I don't think it's ever best practice to just put your head in the sand and just hope for the best. And without knowing what the problems are or what areas that we can improve on, we can never get better. So don't be afraid to do that. That would be my biggest advice, is don't be afraid to get that survey. And then once you do have the results, take action. Because if you don't, you will lose even more respect from employees if you don't take any action from the results.
Welcome to On Point with Ron Gailey, where we meet with city leaders to discuss pressing issues, best practices, and ways that citizens and leaders come together to build their communities. City and municipal leaders have some of the toughest jobs in America. They are bombarded by expectations and conflicting demands. This podcast explores how successful leaders navigate that complexity. And now, your host, CEO and founder of On Point Insights, Ron Gailey.
Ryan, nice to see you again. And you see we have the people from Orem with us.
Super excited to talk with Orem today.
Orem, Utah is south of Salt Lake City, probably 20, 25 minutes. And it's at the base of the mountains there under Mount Timpanogos. It's just the most beautiful place, a great setting, and a place I love to visit. And we worked with Dave Young, who's the mayor, and Keri, who's the management services director, and Carson, who is Carson. You're just kind of like a manager, an account manager of some sort, right? What do you do?
Yeah, I am a management analyst for the city.
A management analyst. Well, anyway, they keep him busy, and I know why, because he's very good. And so anyway, it's good to have the three of them. And we worked with Orem some time ago on a staff survey, and we'll talk a little bit about the staff survey that we did with them, but actually they have a good story to tell anyway about their city. And I thought it was fascinating enough that, and useful enough for any city leader to hear what the people of Orem had been working on as a leadership team, as the mayor, and as employed leaders of the city, to talk about some of the things that they've been doing. And so thank you all for coming and joining us today and visiting with us. And early on, why don't we just begin? And Mayor Young, if you'd introduce yourself just a little bit, and then Keri, and then Carson, and just take a couple of minutes.
Okay, I'm Dave Young. I'm the mayor of Orem currently. What else would you like to know?
A little bit about your background.
I've got a pretty varied background. Okay, in 2 seconds. I went to BYU. I used to have a professional stage show called Grand Illusion. We did over 250 shows all across the Western United States.
Huh.
So I've been in entertainment. I started a number of businesses from 79 to 86, a number of franchises, and I sold all those in 1986. From that, I formed an investment company, and we've invested in all things to do with the stock market, the real estate market, a lot of venture capital types of things. So I've been involved in the investment markets, and my wife and I had lived in Orem for 33 years. And I talked to my wife about moving somewhere, and we had that conversation a few times over the years, and she never wanted to move. She likes our house and she likes Orem. So I decided, well, people are always complaining about these different issues in Orem. So if I'm going to die here, I'm going to see what I can do to fix it. And so I decided to run for mayor. So there you have it.
The perfect leader. All right. And we'll be glad to hear more from you. Keri, tell us a little bit about you.
Thanks, Ron. So I've worked for the city of Orem for the last almost 5 years now. I've been in local government for over a decade, and before that, I worked in the private sector, I have a bachelor's degree in human resources management and a master's degree in business management and leadership, which is really my passion, is focusing on teaching the next generation of leaders how they can be successful. And employee engagement is really important to me as well. And I haven't had quite of an exciting background as Mayor Young with his entertainment career, but I am very passionate about the positive experience that employees can have in the organization, and that really is what I love most about what I do.
And Carson, let's hear about you.
Yeah. So, yeah, like Mayor, I went to BYU for my undergrad, got my bachelor's in public relations, actually. And then went on to Texas A&M University to get my master's in public administration and dove right into local government after that. I worked previously with the city of Mesa in Arizona, and then was fortunate enough to be able to get a position here in Orem, Utah. I'm a Utah native, was happy to come back to such a great city. We get to do a lot of things here as one of Utah's largest cities. And this was actually one of the first projects that I was tasked with. I've been here just under a year, and so this project has been pretty meaningful for my start in local government.
Mayor, when you became mayor of the city of Orem, which has about 100,000 people, a little over 100,000 population, tell us about what the city was like and some of the challenges you faced as a new mayor.
Oh, the city's, I mean, as you mentioned, it's a beautiful place. It's got a lot going on. It's a really great city. But one of the reasons I ran was there was a disconnect between the people that lived in Orem and the city council that was elected by the people, and then the city management itself. And so one of my big goals was to get those three aligned together and on the same page. And so from that, one of the first things we had to do was our city council had always been much more ceremonial. The city management pretty much ran the city, and the city council pretty much rubber stamped things and did more ceremonial types of things. And that created a disconnect between the people and the city, because the people a lot of times felt like they weren't being heard. And so, for example, one of the big controversies was we'd had about 4,500 apartments go in the previous 10 or 11 years, and the citizens generally didn't want that, but the city was pushing that. The city council was going along with it. And so, in short, we just decided to do what we could to align those things and make it so that the city council was actually leading the direction proactively of the city, and thereby the citizens were heard and their voice was heard in that direction. And so that was the path that we started down 2 years ago.
And what were some of the challenges then? Like number one, you're probably one of so many thousands of cities that are pretty much functioning that way. And I've worked with a variety of them, right? And the idea of a proactive, leadership-oriented mayor and city council is just so refreshing to hear. Maybe coming over to you, Keri. So can you tell me more about the situation and then how did you get a handle on making changes when I'm sure if the city managers, or the city manager and others were pretty much leading the city, they were not in favor of the mayor and council coming in and taking a bigger role, would be my guess. Help me understand a little bit more about how that went.
The mayor could probably speak more to that, but from my perspective, there were some changes administratively that the mayor and council made, and then we were able to reorganize the organization and put together some really important studies that the mayor had suggested. So one of them is this employee engagement study that we did with your team. And we're also doing an efficiency study with another third party. So by that, we can reorganize the city administration and departments to be more effective and efficient in a positive way. And employees have been really receptive and excited about a lot of these changes because then, especially with this employee engagement survey, they've had an opportunity to give advice and suggestions on things that they'd like to see change here in the organization.
I like it. I love it.
Say, Ron, one of the things, just to clarify, so when we made these changes in city government, and there were about a dozen of them, we considered for a new city manager to go outside and bring someone else in. And that meant the theory would be we would find someone who was not in the organization, who would come in, bring their expertise, and then try and figure out how to best lay that over the city, in a positive way. But as we went through that process, we came to the conclusion that the assistant city manager, Brent Bybee, had all the qualifications to really take the city to the next level. But what we weren't sure on is if he had the level of expertise and information to be able to do that. And so that's why we decided to do some of these studies. We thought that if Bren is very capable, and if he's got the right information, then he can make the best decisions to take the city forward. And that's what Keri's talking about as far as this survey that you guys did for us. That was to figure out where our employees were at, how happy they were, how effective they were, how just all the different metrics that you measured. And then there's another study that we're doing where we're doing more of a management consulting type of study where we're going into every department and trying to figure out if they're optimally structured, if they're optimally run, if they've got good best practices. We're really trying to understand how well our departments are all being run, and then get the information we need to make them the best run. And we're giving that information to Bren, who is the new city manager, so that he'll have the best information to move forward on that.
Are there other things you did to help Bren be successful as your new city manager?
Well, getting good information is huge, and then as far as, like you say, helping Bren be successful, I mean, Bren's got the capability, he's got the heart, he's got the soul, he's got the mindset, so he's got the tools to make it happen, and we're just trying to give him everything he needs to make that happen.
Very cool. Hey, Carson, so we did a study for you, a survey for you. Tell me a little bit about your observations as we began a staff survey for you.
Yeah. So this was a neat opportunity for the city to, take advantage of at the direction of the mayor and the council. They want to make sure, the city's motto is Family City USA, and we treat each other as staff, as family. And so family takes care of family. And so this engagement survey was really directed by city leadership to do just that, to figure out how can we listen and get feedback from our employees so that there's this interaction between city leadership and staff throughout the entire organization. So with that direction, we were able to work with you to come up with this employee engagement survey with the intent to take feedback from employees to make the workplace a happy place where they did feel like they were part of the family in Family City USA. And, when you have employees engaged to that level, their work becomes that much more meaningful to them. And it just, impacts the entire city, not just the organization of city government, but the city as a whole and the residents and the services that they receive from those employees.
Now, Keri and Dave, hasn't Orem done an employee survey in the past?
Yes, we have. We hadn't done one in my tenure here, so in the 5 years since I started, we hadn't done one, but we have done them in the past. They were very different than the survey that you guys were able to provide for us, but we have done them in the past, yes.
Well, and to say, Ron, and there were some on the city council that have been skeptical of surveys, and the reason for that is because depending on who's doing the survey and how it's structured, you can have a push type survey, right, where you can push the results that you want. And so, as mayor of city council, we just wanted the actual data. We didn't want push data. And so that's where your firm came in, is when I met you down in St. George at that conference, and you went through your process and how it worked. I felt like it was very different than a lot of the survey companies I've seen. And then I mean, in my business, I work with a ton of data and surveys and studies and that sort of thing. I just thought your process was really solid. So that's why I went back and pitched the city council on doing this.
Well, it is different. If people in the audience don't know, I come from a business background myself. So I worked at a couple of major banks, and then for Coca-Cola, I worked with them. And my job was always to help the executives of my company make decisions. And I couldn't believe, you'd think with Coca-Cola, we'd have some of the best surveys on the earth. You know what I mean? You'd think we would. And we did, but the academic way that a lot of them approach it, it's just not that useful sometimes for a business leader to make a good decision. And you can introduce fatigue and all kinds of bias. So you're right. The approach that we took is far more, how can we say? It helps quickly establish priorities and then helps quickly understand where the issues are on important factors. And so it's just a very different approach.
What other concerns did the city council have concerning the survey, and maybe how did you go about convincing them? Just going into this, what were you hoping for and what were you worried about?
We just didn't want any kind of bias from the group doing the survey. In this situation, though, it was a matter of making sure that there was no bias introduced. And a big part of that was, okay, we want to ask the employees the questions. Or not us, but we want the survey company to ask the questions, and we want the employees to feel total confidence. No matter what they say, it's not going to hurt them in any way. So that way they can be totally honest with what they say. So there was that piece of it. And then our other issue was sometimes employees or anyone for that matter, is not that enthused about doing a survey. And so we wanted to try and get as high a participation as we possibly could. And so Keri put some things together on that side, but that was another issue. It was really good participation and no chance of any retribution for saying things that, for telling the truth, basically.
Keri, what were your thoughts?
I agree with everything that Mayor has said. We really wanted to have a holistic approach to this, and we wanted to hear from every department and the largest sampling that we could get. So we did something a little unusual that I don't know that other people have necessarily tried before, and we would highly recommend. And that was that we offered a couple of hours of PTO for their participation. And the way that we were able to do that was through OnPoint. They were able to collect the percentage of number of people who had participated without letting us know who hadn't. And if we reached the 90% participation rate, we were able to give every employee some PTO time off. And Ron, I can't remember our participation rate, but it was above the 90% mark.
Yeah, we got 95% of your full-time employees.
That's pretty good when you consider most of them don't like to read their emails ever. So the fact that they participated is awesome.
That's incredible.
No, I think I totally agree with you. And I just thought that it went really well. And, my compliments to you as a city for saying, hey, let's do an incentive of a little bit of time off. And, we've copied that with other cities.
That's awesome.
And we've gotten the same, like really high participation rate, One got nearly 90. They got like 88% participation rate. But still, if you're talking this town only had 125 employees, it's important. You don't want to get down to just 40 or 50% of your employees taking it. You want a big number.
Yeah. And Ron, if I can add, it wasn't only important to us to get representative samples from all the departments in the city, but it was also important to actually have action taken based on the survey, which our city is, I think, another, leader in this field. A lot of companies, even places I've worked in the past, you take a survey and then you never hear anything again about the survey. It's like, okay, check the box. We engaged with our staff and they gave us feedback. Let's just keep doing what we're doing. The city leadership here has been very proactive in taking this to the next level rather than just the simple, we gave the survey out, let's move on with life. Now we're actively engaged with each department. Actually, we've created what we call I teams, innovation teams that we have in our city. And we have an I team specifically to go over these results from the survey. We're very transparent with them and open, and the employees feel open to communicate about their ideas, brainstorming, concerns. And so with these I teams, we're looking at the data with them. We're engaging with the staff from across the city and creating, actionable items to implement to improve the engagement and, increase what is already a great response to employee engagement in the city, but just enhancing that. So I really want to tip my hat off to our city leadership, mayor, council, city manager's office, Keri, for the effort to, take it to the next level and let employees know we are actually listening to you.
I love that.
That's great.
I love that. And did you find that you've been in on these teams? Were they able to help me understand a little bit about what some of these teams, how easily they've been able to use the data to figure out some things to do or to get to creative ideas? I mean, how did that work? Because sometimes, you get survey results and what to do next becomes the big challenge, right? And it doesn't sound like what to do next was your challenge.
Yeah. Well, the way we've run these I teams, we've had 3 separate ones now. The way you had structured the survey, it was broken up into different categories. Engagement and meaning, benefits. What we did is we took 2 of those categories at a time for each meeting and ran these as focus groups with the employees. Yeah, here we go. Engagement and meaning on the screen here. So we talked about what the data means. What does okay, poor, very poor mean? What are these? Why are they in the order that they are in, top to bottom on the importance ranking?
Uh-huh.
And that allowed us to, focus the employees on these I teams to hone in on here's what city staff highly value and here's how we think we're doing. So if it was something that was very important and had, less than 50% that thought it was good, we said, hey, let's focus on this topic here. And then we took them through a series of activities to inspire brainstorming and discussions around that topic.
I love that.
And we use the data to focus the conversation, right? Because there's a million things that you could do as an organization, but focusing the conversation on where the data says things matter is where we went with this.
That's brilliant. Do you have any specific examples from a department or a specific session that were noteworthy?
I'm not going to speak to anything in particular, but what I do think is noteworthy from all these is how meaningful it was to the employees. They were so excited that we were doing this. I can't even tell you how excited they were to be there. It was an open invitation to all staff that wanted to participate. We have the best of the best in the city, so there was high participation, and they all had meaningful things to contribute, and they were excited that the city values their opinion. And
what are your recommendations to other city leaders that want to have engaged staff that are happy to come to work? How does the survey play into that, and what else do you need to do?
I think I'll take that one. I would
Please.
say that a survey is only the very first step. In fact, I consider it the step before you start in better engagement with employees, because that's really giving you the baseline on what employees appreciate that you're doing and the areas that you can improve on. And then you can actually start the process in improving your employee engagement because you have that baseline. And you can maybe we're spending a lot of money on a benefit or a process that we feel like is a value to employees, but they don't find any value in that, then we know that we can take that allocation of funds and put it into something that they find more value.
Because you're asking about for other city leaders, I really think unless you have some kind of survey or some data to base your opinion on, say, for example, there's 4 of us here in a room, or on this 5 of us on this podcast, we might all have different opinions about this, that, and the other. But unless we really drill down to the facts, and the only way you get the facts, not just everyone's opinions, is to have concrete data coming from a survey. And so I believe you got to get that foundation before you can do anything meaningful. Otherwise, you're just kind of guessing where you're going.
As you know, and even with your city, things went well. 80% said things are going in the right direction, and 20% said, I'm not so sure about that, right? And those 20% can be rather destructive sometimes in the way they go about it. And yet they can be also very helpful if they have a feeling that it's not going in the right direction and they have an idea of how to make it better. As a matter of fact, I received a phone call after we were finished from an employee who took it, and he was rather concerned that it was biased. That was his concern. I said, if the city paid for it, it's biased. And I said, no, the city paid for it, but I 100% guarantee you it was not biased. I made sure with everything that I could design that they would get the exact feedback they needed. And I said, look, 80% were very, very happy with the way things are going in the city, and 20% were not. And my guess is you're in the 20%. And my guess is you also have friends who are in the 20%. And so it might feel like there's a lot more people who are negative than there are, but there's a lot of very satisfied people who are working for the city right now. And he actually calmed down and became quite gentlemanly, toward the, after we explained the process and the steps and the reasons why it was done the way it was done. He became quite supportive. And maybe, who knows what a year from now brings if you do it again, but he was a bit negative.
Yeah. Well, that's why, like the mayor said earlier, I think they were wise in, choosing a third party for that reason. It mitigates any responsibility on the city. We do not, you created the questions, you disseminated the survey to the employees, you collected the data. So I think it helps, ease those fears of, is there bias? Are they skewing the data? Or even help employees feel like they're not going to be retaliated against because we can't drill down and find, so-and-so said this, so let's make their lives miserable or something. There's no possibility of that. And I think that helped our response rate. And I think it helped employees feel confident in the actual survey itself.
So if a city leader listening to this survey podcast, if they were wondering what advice you might have for anybody who's wondering about doing something like this, what would you do differently? What would you do differently the next time? What advice would you have for them as they're considering it? Any thoughts? Keri, what are your thoughts?
I don't know that we would do anything differently other than adding some additional questions of things that had come up after we had done the survey that we'd like to know more about in the future. But I would say my advice to future leadership is, in other organizations, is to not be afraid to do a survey. Because if you want to just stay in the dark and you're worried that the results aren't going to be positive or that you're not going to be able to satisfy employees once you know what their problems are, I don't think it's ever best practice to just put your head in the sand and just hope for the best. And without knowing what the problems are or what areas that we can improve on, we can never get better. So don't be afraid to do that. That would be my biggest advice, is don't be afraid to get that survey. And then once you do have the results, take action. Because if you don't, you will lose even more respect from employees if you don't take any action from the results.
Well said.
Mayor, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree completely with what Keri just said. Don't be afraid to take the survey. You need to know what's going on in your city. for better or for worse, you really need to know what's going on. And if things are bad, then it gives you the information that you can fix those. If things are good, it gives you information you can go to the next level. So there's no reason not to take a survey. And then the second point, it would be the same as hers. Once you take the survey, you've got to have a proactive plan to implement it throughout your organization to benefit from it. Because if you don't do that, then you might as well not have taken it. So anyway.
I love it.
Yeah.
Carson, having been the one who had to put your head down and work with us on this, what advice would you have for somebody who's in charge of executing this thing for the city?
Honestly, I think you can look retroactively at anything you do and critique it and improve it, which is perfectly fine. I think we have lessons learned for next time, but there's nothing that I would say I would change about the process because it gave us what we were looking for. One of the biggest things that we benefited from was the investment of our elected officials in this, right? They were the ones, Mayor Young championed this, and they were involved throughout the whole process, which I think is critical to making it successful because, if your elected officials are involved in this and actively caring about the employees and their engagement in the organization, when you do get to the next step of implementation and action, they're going to be very supportive of it, whether it was, being able to incentivize it with some PTO, being able to do these I-teams, and even to fund the survey at the direction of the mayor and council. None of it would have been possible without their buy-in and their help. They helped review questions even. They were very involved, and so just involve your electeds.
I love it. Ryan, any final thoughts?
Well, it's been a pleasure hearing from Mayor Young and Keri and Carson, and I'm just glad we got to work with Orem, and I hope we get to continue to work with Orem.
Yeah, Mayor, a final word?
I think we've covered everything. I appreciate you inviting us here to go through this, and we've appreciated working with you. We think you did a great job, and we'll be on board again.
Thanks for listening. If you found this discussion valuable, please consider subscribing and sharing with others. If you have a topic or question you'd like to hear us discuss in our next episode, leave a comment or send us an email. It's podcast@onpoint-insights.com. See you next time.